It's the Eagle Community Television Forum with your host, Gary Shorman.
Hi everyone, I'm Gary Shorman, and this is a forum on Eagle Community Television. The forum is brought to you by Hayes Med. We have with us a guest that you'll be hearing a lot from in the next few months. His name is Ken Rahjes, and Ken will be a new face in the Kansas legislature come this January. Ken, good to have us on the program.
Well, Gary, thanks a lot for the invitation. Appreciate it.
You know what? Just a few weeks ago, you were just out there running an ag company. In fact, your ag company was called Authentic Ag in Nebraska. Next thing you know, you're in the state legislature in Kansas. That had to be an exciting time.
Well, it's been quite a very interesting experience, Gary. As this has happened just a few short weeks ago. The representative decided to take a different job, and so that created that opportunity back on the home farm. And we had been doing some things in Kansas anyway, so it was, as we tell folks, you can own a house anywhere, but where your home is where your roots are. And so it happened to be a very quick opportunity and something that I was, I think, always been preparing for if this opportunity came, and so here it is.
Well, a couple of weeks ago on this very program, we interviewed Travis Couture-Lovelady and talked about his new position and what he'd put into that position, and it was a challenge for him making the change. But when he took the new job, that left an opening. We needed somebody from Kansas. And you mentioned roots. You do have some pretty significant roots in Kansas.
Our farm is located at Agra up in Phillips County, and in the 110th, it's in the far north, kind of northeast corner of the district. And so in this area, I grew up in this area, spent a lot of time in this area, and so very much familiar. And you know, it just happened to be our address was Nebraska, and I think that kind of that line, if you will, state to state. But there's a lot of cooperation, and in the company that I own, and the radio and the television things that I do, I'm in Kansas all the time, and so very much aware of the issues facing the state.
You also have some heritage with your dad being involved in the Kansas Farm Bureau, but also being a big supporter of Senator Jerry Moran.
Well, that is true, Gary. My dad, Doyle, who passed away just a few weeks ago in October, served as Kansas Farm Bureau president for a little bit over a decade, and also served as now Senator Moran's campaign chairman through his run in the House of Representatives. And so there has been kind of that long blazing the trail, if you will, of being involved in maybe not necessarily so much politics, but just as community service and trying to better Northwest Kansas and the state as a whole.
Well, let's go back just a little bit, and then we'll talk about what you plan to do and some of your history. But what triggered you to say, I want to be in politics, especially Kansas politics?
Well,
what happened?
Well, as I like to tell people, glad you asked. But you know, the opportunity, there are some challenges. And the love I still have for Kansas is really what made that opportunity. I actually did make a phone call to some folks in Phillips County, and when I heard that Travis had decided to take a job at the NRA, and that's great for him, and what's going on, what the possibilities are, and somebody said, well, would you be interested in moving back? And my concern was, well, that transition has not been maybe as quick as what we wanted to, just because of some family situations, but we were able to do that very quickly. But I'm up for a challenge. I'm up for one that knows that the budget situation, a lot of other things, and so I think the 110th needs to continue to have strong leadership, and so we might as well dive first. The nice thing is, Gary, this is the short session, so you know, last year was the longest one ever, and so there'll be some cleanup things and some other things that will be going on. So it's an opportunity then, as we look at the next election cycle, you're coming in in a sense as an incumbent, because you're already seated as a member of the House.
Well, you mentioned this is going to be a short session. We'll come back to the legislative session, but let's get to know you just a little bit more. You mentioned that you have roots in Kansas, but you're an ag broadcaster, right? And you run a company in Nebraska. In fact, on some of our Eagle radio stations in Nebraska, you do ag reports up there. Obviously a big history there, but tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what you've done along the line.
Well, like I said, grew up on the farm in near Agra. It's just right outside of Agra, and have been involved in all facets of production agriculture. In high school, got the early bug to get involved in broadcasting. Wanted to be a sports broadcaster.
Everybody wants to be a sports broadcaster.
Did when they got started. Started in Phillipsburg at KKN AM radio. That was when FMs really started to take hold in western Kansas. And but decided when I went off to college, I went to K-State, and realized that maybe there's a lot of people that wanted it worse than me, and so I wanted to get involved in agriculture and started out ag economics and ag communications, and then that's kind of where it began. I did some things off the farm, worked in Emporia in radio, as well as I started in Colby in radio, then Emporia, and then worked outside the industry, but always kept getting brought back into radio. Moved back to the farm in the early 90s, actually 1990, got married, been married now for 25 years, and once we left the farm, got back involved in agriculture broadcasting, and have done that, and actually spent a term, congressional term, working for a congressman in Nebraska as ag representative. So I think one of the things, Gary, I bring a perspective, knowing from the national scene, know how that works, been following what's going on in the state scene, and again, with that long interest in, to make our community strong, that's one of the driving passions of why kind of we are where we are today.
Well, you mentioned Agri-Kansas, but one of the things that does happen in the legislature, and I assume you see this as well, you know, there's that big city side of the legislature along with the rural side, and sometimes it's not a fair split. And having somebody that communicate Western Kansas needs and the things that are different out here than they are in the city is so important. How can you tell that story, especially where you've been in Nebraska for a while? What gives you the tools to tell that story?
Well, I think just naturally what I do as a communicator, I think that will help. Over the years, been involved in Topeka and other places, and so there's already some of those connections. And it is a daunting task to try to help tell the story of Western Kansas. But I think what people really find is there are some cooperative things. The aviation industry and agriculture. They both manufacture. One manufactures planes, one manufactures food. So as we look at some of the tax structures, those are things together. Now there are some challenges, I have to admit. I mean, there'll be some challenges with our Johnson County folks. But I think overall what we find is members of the legislature still want what's best for the state of Kansas. And so if you're there and you're willing to have a discussion about some of those issues, that Western Kansas will still be able to be represented as fair as possible. I mean, obviously the political climate right now, it starts from the national on down, and so a lot of folks focus on what they see on television from the national standpoint, and it kind of rolls into the state, into the local. Well, I'm a firm believer in local control, and that all politics is still local. It still goes back to that, as we did when we won our special election, is talking to people. Go out and believe in that what I consider the true social media, which is actually talking to somebody face to face. There's still, that art has not been lost yet.
Now, when you did that and coming through, you're representing this area, the 110th district. What did people tell you that they needed you to take to Topeka with them?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because as I'm kind of doing some barnstorming. I've spent about a 14-hour day, make that, in Rooks County just a few days ago, and have spent some time in Phillips County, and we'll spend some time in Norton County, getting over to Ellis before the session starts. And that's one of the first things I ask. What do I need to know if I take to Topeka from those that showed up? And obviously, I mean, they're concerned about education. How are we going to fund education? The tax structure, what's going to go on there, finding economic opportunities for not only them, but maybe their children. And so those are just some of the things that we're talking about. Also, what's going to go on with concealed carry possible on campuses. That's been an issue that has been on a lot of people's minds. But I think the overall is looking at the economy. It still goes back to creating those opportunities.
You know, I would think there are some things that are specific to Northwest Kansas. You know, you have some statewide, like this concealed carry, that seems like that would be more important in Lawrence, Manhattan, and some of those other communities than maybe Northwest Kansas. But picking and choosing those is going to be your next big task. And we're going to talk about that, Ken, when we come back. And we'll find out maybe some of the challenges that you're going to face in Topeka. We'll talk about how you plan to handle those. Our guest is Ken Rahjes. He's our new legislator for the 110th District in Kansas. Back with more after this.
It's a beautiful day in our super high-speed internet great customer service neighborhood. Like you, this is where we live. In fact, our company is employee-owned, so it's our goal to improve the quality of life for everyone in our community by delivering faster, more reliable internet, clearer, more feature-laden phone service, quality TV channels, all with the level of customer service you'd expect from people who are your neighbors. Eagle Communications. Our community connected.
Welcome back to the second half of our forum program here on Eagle Community Television. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, suggestions, we'd like to hear from you. You can send me a note at gary.shorman@eaglecom.net. You can also go on Facebook. We just took a good picture for Facebook. We'll be right there on the forum. That's under ECTV Forum. Click there and you'll see some history of our past programs, and you can review those as well as make comments and suggestions from there. Again, our guest is Ken Rahjes, and Ken is our new representative for the 110th District up in our area here in Northwest Kansas. He has taken the position that Travis Couture-Lovelady held in the state of Kansas. And Ken, we went into the break talking about some of the things you're hearing as you're doing, you called your barnstorming tour. When we get to Topeka, though, really it's going to be a money issue for so many things. With oil, revenues down. Agriculture is some areas of concern as well from a revenue standpoint. Dollars are going to be tight, and yet things like education, some of the social funding out there really needs help. How do you make up that difference in the state? How do you make a difference there?
Well, I think right now, as we're still days away from getting started, looking at, we all have pretty much seen what the projections are, and it's going to create a challenge. And whether that would be finding a way to fund public education, if the Supreme Court ruling comes down, that may create another whole set of issues. But you're right, everybody seeming to want a lot of things. And in our district, in the 110th, one of my concerns, as I told folks on that election night we had, is that very much looking at the oil industry. I don't know a ton about it, but I know that with the prices the way they are, it's creating a lot of hardship in some of our areas, especially in Rooks County, portions of Norton and Phillips County as well. So that will be one, because of course everybody's wanting to not only have to get everything as funded as much as possible, but we can't run a deficit. So that's going to be, and if the will is there to not raise taxes, we've got to find ways to cut, because. But again, as we turn the calendar, it's election year. As we said earlier, short session, but every member of the Kansas House and Kansas Senate up for re-election, primaries in August.
Yeah, you've said a couple of times a short session. Probably wouldn't be doing my job if it's like, there hadn't been a short session in about 100 years. So well, what is the goal of making it short? Because some of these things are going to come up and it's going to be a challenge.
Well, I think so. I think when we talk about short session, we typically talk, usually in history says that the budget one is always the long one. There's been different stories. Some say 74 days. Another one says, I talked to some people last week, says, well, expect it to be even longer than last year's, depending on what happens. Right. So we may be a little bit longer if we wait till later on to really start tackling these issues. They're finding savings, finding some sort of ways to make things happen and balance.
You mentioned, there's a couple of things that could send it long. One is the court decision coming out. How will that affect the 110th district?
Well, I have 10 districts that I'll be representing, and I say we because
10 school districts.
10 school districts within, yeah. Within the 110th. It's a team effort, and so I have schools anywhere from 3A in Norton to several 1As. Mm-hmm. Palco, I think, is our smallest district, and so we've talked with superintendents, we've talked to some of the school board members. We'll continue to have that discussion. And I mean, it's going to create an issue. We've got several things that hopefully will get taken care of. Some things that were passed in the past, some laws that were passed. There's some cleanups. The caper situation is another one out there that I'm continuing to learn more about it, and to make sure that we do have administrators in some of our districts, because it is going to create a challenge.
Do you ever feel like a new puppy on the playground, where all of a sudden, hey, this is new, this is a lot of fun, and then it's all of a sudden you get to go in and it's class time, and it's like, oh boy.
I will tell you, the honeymoon period was very, very short. We got to work that evening, especially that morning. It was a 12-hour day, the Friday after that first day, and so not only everybody wants to be your friend, everybody wants to make sure that you have time to talk with them and get their position outside of the district. But I continue to focus on meeting as many people within the district before we go down there, and just like you and I, sitting across from each other face to face, so that we have that connection. So when something comes up in Topeka, however long that session is, you and I have built that relationship. I've looked you in the eye, and I want to hear from you. And so I think that's what's going to be one of the keys as we go through this. I mean, right now I'm 125 of 125, but even since my election, there's been a Republican and a Democrat that have resigned. Those positions will be filled. So actually, I'll be like 123 of 125. So I'm moving up.
You're moving up the ladder already. You know, when you look at that, you know, being new, that can be advantage or disadvantage as you go into this, because you don't maybe have some of that. Have you already had some, I'll call it outside Kansas, or certainly outside the 110th, that's already saying, hey, Ken, we want you to vote this way, we want you to do this, we want you to do that, before you even get there?
No, I haven't. I think there's a lot of people early on. There's a lot of people outside the district in the state that were very interested in this race and wanted to talk, wanted to hear some things, wanted to try to how do I label myself? What do I think about this issue and that issue? And quite honestly, I'm continuing to learn. And so I think if there is an advantage I have right now, it's I haven't cast a vote yet. So to try to say, well, you're this way or that way, well, how do you know? How do you know for sure till we get down there? So I think right now there is a little bit of the honeymoon period, but I mean it was already there. And believe me, I'm reading and talking to him a bunch. So
they say it's a part-time job, but I don't think it's a part-time job if you're working 12 and 14 hours a week to keep up.
Well, as a farmer, you're used to that. That's normal.
That's a short day.
That's it.
Hey, one thing, and you know, you're filling in half a term. Wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask. Is this something that you're looking forward to doing longer term?
Yes.
Or is this a one
No,
get in and then have somebody else?
I think it would be unfair for the 110th district if I was just going to be a caretaker for a few months. My plan is to file for re-election before I go down to Topeka on the 11th of January, to already have that in place so everybody understands, everybody knows where I'm standing. So it's just a matter of, with the holiday, with everything else going on and making all the moves and everything, we will get it done. We're going to wait till after the first of the year to do it.
One of the things that I know people have listened here and they're going, boy, you're making this barnstorming tour. By the time this gets on the air, several of those and many of those may have already been done. So if somebody wants to catch up with you, they haven't had a chance to talk, what's the best way to find Ken Rahjes and say, hey, I want you to represent this for me?
Sure, there's several ways, pretty simple. On email, it's kenrahjes@gmail.com. I have a phone number, 785-302-8416. And hopefully by this time, my website, Ken for Kansas, we're working on it right now as we speak anyway, will be up. So Ken for Kansas will be another way for folks to contact. And again, political affiliation doesn't matter to me. I represent folks in the 110th, so I want to hear from everybody.
And those are the things that happen, especially you get into the session, and I assume you'll be down there, you'll have a real, do you get a real office when you're 123rd, or do you know where you are yet?
We're still figuring that out, but again, because of the resignations, there's a shuffle,
of
and
offices,
so we haven't right now figured out what committees I'm going to be on based on what's going to go on because of Mr. Couture Lovelady and who's going to fill in his position. So the way I understand it, though, I will have an office, and you'll see me throughout on the weekends when we're not in session. We're going to be in every community, and we hopefully will be, if we're not in community every week, which we just can't be because there's so many, but once or twice a month is on the weekends, we'll be there to give people an opportunity to talk face to face.
And the other thing about it, I know you go in, you won't take over the same committees that Travis Couture Lovelady had. Have you had any indication of what you'll be a part of yet, or when will you find that out?
I think really within the days. It's a matter of, I talked with them just a couple of days ago as they're working out, again, who's going to fill in because Travis was high up in a couple of different committees, so trying to replace him, and then if other folks want to move that have the opportunity to. As I said, I'll go whatever committee. I think, with some of the background that I bring, I can help and bring some of those other thought process to whichever committee it is. I just want to serve the people.
Well, Ken, I hope people out there realize your energy for getting this done, being a part of this, and representing the 110th District very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and we look forward to having more of these.
Very good. Ken Rahjes has been our guest here on the forum. He'll be our new representative for the 110th District at the Kansas Legislature starting here in January. Hope you've enjoyed the forum program. Again, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. The forum's brought to you by Hayes Med and by Eagle Communications. Our community connected.
Hayes Med is your first and best choice for healthcare. They're the only facility providing tertiary level services in this region. With more than 70 physicians and 26 specialties ranging from heart, orthopedic, spine care, cancer, obstetrics and gynecology, wound care, rehabilitation and surgery, including the Da Vinci robotic surgery, Hayes Med is your comprehensive health provider for people throughout Western Kansas. Hayes Med, helping people be healthy.